So one of the things that we have created for you with this workshop series is a guidebook that accompanies the workshop. And we've done this for a special reason. We don't want you to feel like you have to be taking copious notes. There's a lot of information here, and so we wanted it to be really well laid out for you so that you can follow along as we go through the workshop. So if you haven't already, locate the chat, and I want you to have a go at clicking the link there that takes you directly to the guidebook. And so what I'm going to do is share my screen. So that you can see the guidebook on my screen. I'm going to close the chat so it doesn't distract me. And so I just want to say a few words about the guidebook. So what we've done here with this is we've created a guidebook that really runs you through the content. And what we wanted it to be is this kind of living, breathing document that you are able to ask questions directly into the document. We've set it so that you should, with the link that we've put there in the chat, you should be able to access it. You won't be able to edit it because that could get messy, but you will be able to make comments and questions. So I'm just going to take a moment to show you how to do that. So for example, if you wanted to make a comment on any aspect basically of the content, you would, let me just move this around so it's, you can see everything. You would simply highlight the area of text that relates to your question, and you click here to add a comment. And then you type away your comment and you comment. And then once that's there, just going to resolve that so it gets rid of it, we can respond to it, answer it, all of that stuff. So do be aware that whatever you put in the comments inside the guidebook, everybody can see. So I see people, you can see people up here now joining the guide, but that's great. So what we're going to ask you to do though, just for the purposes for our sanity basically, is if you have questions that come up while we're on the live calls, ask them in the chat, not the document. And then use that function of asking questions or adding comments to the guidebook outside of the call. So, you know, if you're referring back to the guidebook or something, a question occurs to you outside of the calls, what we'll invite you to do is, you know, put your comments in there or email us directly, whichever is more appropriate. So, and yeah, I think that's it in terms of kind of like, you know, the nuts and bolts and all of that stuff. So what I want to do is just give you a really quick overview of the workshop series. So it's called The Business of Coaching. I'm not going to go on too much here because you've already purchased your spot, so you know what it's about. But essentially what we're presenting here is an alternative, what we see as an alternative approach to the mainstream kind of business advice that you're going to see out there for growing and building a coaching or service-based business. And so, you know, what you won't find in what we're going to share with you over these 3 workshops, you're not going to find, you know, a get-rich-quick scheme. You're not going to find, you know, 6 weeks to 6 figures. It's none of that stuff. We really, you know, Helen and I, over the years of kind of through trial and error, and lots of hard work, you know, pull together this approach that works for us, that feels, you know, rooted in integrity. It's sustainable to implement, and it really does away with kind of the icky sales strategies that, you know, most of us as heart-centered entrepreneurs just don't really, you know, don't sit well with us at all. And so we've got 3 workshops, each consisting of 90 minutes, fingers crossed we don't run over the next 3 weeks. And through those workshops, we're going to be taking you through a journey to understand the big picture of the approach that we're going to be sharing with you, to lay the foundations of what's needed to make this approach work for you in your business. And then in the final workshop, we share the nuts and bolts of how to execute the strategy behind it. So that workshop 1 is today, the big picture. Workshop 2, lay the foundations, and workshop 3, execute the strategy. So unless anyone has any questions about what I've shared in terms of the controls and all of that stuff, I'm going to hand over to Helen to go through a bit more general housekeeping.
All right. Just going to touch base and see if everybody, I know there are a couple comments just about the link being missing. So I just want to be sure that you all have found it now. I posted it another couple times. It might have vanished. Okay, good. I see Sheila and Grace nodding. And okay, good. Excellent. All right. So we are going to start out the general housekeeping with some intentions. We just want to kind of lay the groundwork here. The first one is timekeeping, which Caroline already sort of addressed. This is our first time running this workshop live. So as you can imagine, you can do lots of dress rehearsals and still not really be clear on how long it takes to actually, give voice to everything. So we are committed, though, to sticking to the allotted 90 minutes, give or take 5 minutes. If it turns out that we could use a little extra time to cover 1 or 2 points, and we want to bump it over into workshop 2, we'll do that. If at the end of workshop 3, we've bumped over too much, we will tack on another call. If you're unable to make the call, that's okay. It will be recorded. So you're not going to miss anything. We just want to make sure we cover everything. We want you to get a lot of value out of this. And that might mean that we spill over a little bit because, we're human. So that's our first intention with timekeeping. The next is execution over information. So our intention here is definitely to spur you into action. So that being said, we should warn you that the workshop series is pretty much information heavy. It's covering our collective years of coaching business experience. We've got a lot to share. In service to the idea of execution over information, we're going to be giving you some homework assignments in between each workshop. So these are going to be kind of actions that you can take in the time between today and next Wednesday, and then next Wednesday and the Wednesday after. Of course, you're not required to do them. But as with anything in life, you'll get out of it what you put into it. So we absolutely encourage you to lean into these little challenges rather than to shy away from them. And then our third intention is to demystify and simplify your business activities. As it says in the document, we want you to walk away from these workshops feeling as though you've had more than just a look behind the curtain, but that you've actually been behind the curtain yourself. We want you to feel as though you've truly internalized this information and that you feel absolutely clear about what you need to do next. No overwhelm, no second guessing, and absolutely no additional research is needed after this. You'll know what you need to do, and you'll feel galvanized and ready to go. So those are our intentions. Moving on into some agreements. So Caroline and I, this is something we've both come to really appreciate, and now it's really essential in our coaching businesses to set up and to co-create agreements with our clients. So interpersonally, kind of the alternative to an agreement would be an expectation. And just the word, I'm sure, brings up a negative connotation for most of you, because we think of being let down and disappointed when we have expectations and they're not met. And we hardly remember when, feeling like relieved or even jazzed when our expectations are met or exceeded. And I think this is really due in large part to the one-sidedness of expectations. The great thing about agreements, though, is that and what we do with them is that they're co-created. So they're not something that we place on somebody else or that someone else places on us unspoken, and we have to live up to it. It's actually something that we give voice to, we're transparent about. And then with our clients, when we lay out agreements, we always ask them if they can subscribe to those agreements with us and if they have any others to suggest. So since we're modeling this for you now, we want to model it in this workshop series, we decided that we're going to lay out a few agreements that we'd like to propose to the group of us, that the group of us subscribe to within the workshop. So there's only 3 of them. So the first one is to be willing to show up with an empty cup mind. And we've got a link there that will open up a slide, and I'm going to read it to you. You can follow along. A wise old monk once lived in an ancient temple in Japan. One day the monk heard an impatient pounding on the temple door. He opened it and greeted a young student who said, "I have studied with great and wise masters. I consider myself quite accomplished in Zen philosophy. However, just in case there is anything more I need to know, I have come to see if you can add knowledge." "Very well," said the wise old master. "Come and have tea with me and we will discuss your studies." The two seated themselves opposite each other, and the old monk prepared tea. When it was ready, the old monk began to pour the tea carefully into the visitor's cup. When the cup was full, the old man continued pouring until the tea spilled over the side of the cup and onto the young man's lap. The startled visitor jumped back and indignantly shouted, "Some wise master you are! You are a fool who does not even know when a cup is full." The old man calmly replied, "Just like this cup, your mind is so full of ideas that there is no room for any more. Come to me with an empty cup mind, and then you will learn something." So we want you to come with an empty cup mind. We're assuming most of you will have some ideas about business coming into this workshop. And some of the topics that we bring up, the ideas that we're sharing here, you may have even heard of before. But it's still really important to us that you come with this empty cup mind, because that will give us the opportunity to share fully what we've learned from our business experience, and it will give you the opportunity to see something that might be familiar, but in a new and different light. So our second agreement is open to insights. When we change the way we look at something, everything can change. It kind of has that domino effect. So, an insight is really new and fresh thinking that comes about when we are wide open in our minds. We know that, that some folks have hangups around lots of different business concepts. This is maybe due to being burned out or burned in the past, or experiencing some kind of icky sales strategy. Maybe there are some buzzwords that kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth. And we really want to shift your perspective in this workshop series. And we ask that you're open to that. And then lastly, be willing to look stupid. So certainly no question is too small or too silly. And if you have a question, we want you to ask it. We learn so much from each other when we're authentic, when we don't feel the need to impress each other, when we show up with our questions, with our experiences, and we share them freely. So we ask you to do that. So I am going to, because I can't see all of you, I'm going to take silence as your agreement to these, that you're agreeing with us to these agreements. But if you don't agree, or if you have another agreement you'd like to propose, please come over into the chat and add it in now, and either Caroline or I will pick up on that. Also, if you have a question so far, I know it's still early yet, we're just getting started, but if you've got a question for us, pop that into the chat as well. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, so
all right.
Yeah,
I think we're good to move on. I don't see anyone. Oh, let's see. Wonderful. Thank you, Anne.
Great. So hopefully everyone's in agreement. I think they're not too challenging as agreements go. So I'm going to now move us into the workshop content. So basically, as I've already said, today's workshop is the big picture, and how we're going to express that to you is by sharing with you a set of principles to guide your work as you build and grow your coaching business. And so these are, I feel like, hard-won or hard-earned principles that Helen and I have, collected over the years. And so, we share them here as the big picture and the overview of the approach that we're sharing with you. And as we move through the workshop series, we're going to get more and more practical about how you actually, embed these principles into your work to build and grow your business. So we've got 8. I'm going to go through 4 of them, and then I'll be handing over to Helen to run through the other 4. Again, any questions that come up, please do just drop them in the chat, you know, and we'll either open your mic and get you on, or we'll just answer it there and then. So principle number 1, and you know, they're not necessarily in order of importance, although this is, you know, the big picture of the principles to us. So this is, you know, taking an approach that prioritizes serving over selling. And so what we're doing with this approach is we're advocating serving as an alternative, more meaningful approach to business growth. And when I say alternative, what I'm saying there is, you know, the alternative to the typical sales focused approach that you may, you know, be already aware of. And so, you know, what we're inviting you to do here is, rather than have service be a strategy to get the sale, which I've seen some people do with this advice, we want service to be your guiding light, you know. And the reason we think that this is a wonderful approach for specifically for coaches and other service providers, especially heart-centered entrepreneurs, is because that's why we're in this game. This is why we created Coaching Business. You don't typically become a coach because you're in it for the money, or a teacher or a service provider. You do this work because you're called to serve people and to have a greater impact on the world. So it makes sense, and it also explains why so many people in this line of work really struggle with the typical advice around business growth that's out there, because inherently we feel some kind of resistance to this more pushy, you know, manipulative, salesy approach. So what else do I want to say under here? So we also believe that meaningful connection is the best way for you and your clients to grow your business and your reach. We're going to be talking about that more a little later on. The homework that we've set for you for this workshop is all about connection, but that's another piece of this that has, you know, that kind of underlies the strategy. And also it's a word that earlier when Helen was talking about, sometimes, you know, certain words trigger certain things. I've had people respond to this idea of meaningful connection and instead of hearing connection, they hear networking, and they suddenly, you know, their introverted selves start to panic and they think, I don't want to be in connection, you know, I don't want to have to network and talk to people all the time. And so this is why we say meaningful connection. We're not talking about networking here. We're talking about actually building meaningful relationships with people in your audience. Again, we're going to go into this in a lot more detail throughout the course of the workshop. So what I want to do, though, is just run you through an overview of the key differences between the selling approach, you know, having sales be the priority in your business, versus the serving approach, and having service be the priority in your business. So I'm just going to minimize video so I can see the screen. So when selling is our priority, what we're doing is we're aiming to make ourselves and our offerings as attractive as possible to our potential buyers. If service is our priority, what we're aiming to do is deepen our relationship with our people. So we're coming at things from a completely different angle. When we're selling, we're all about marketing to our audience. And when we're serving, we're all about connecting with our audience. You know, it's a key. These are key distinctions. When we're selling, we put out content that encourages our people to buy our products and services. But when we have service as our guiding light, we're creating content that serves our audience powerfully, whether they choose to buy from us or not. When sales is our priority, we put a lot of attention on how we and our businesses look, our website, our branding, our image. And when service is our priority, we put more attention on understanding our audience, what their struggles might be, what their needs are, and what their desires are. The selling approach is about cultivating greater desirability within our audience, and the serving approach is about cultivating greater trust with our audience. And the problem with the sales approach is that it assumes that the most important thing to you, the business owner, is making the sale. Now, that's all well and good for many businesses. But again, I'm going to guess that if you're on this call with Helen and I, and you've chosen coaching as your profession, or helping people through service, that, you know, while sales are important and all well and good, they're not necessarily the ultimate driving force behind why you do what you're doing. And alternatively, under service, the key feature of this approach is that it assumes that the most important thing to you, the business owner, is being of service. So I just wanted to share those with you. And I'm going to go back, there we go, to the document. So I also want to share with you now a couple of examples, just to kind of bring this principle to life of how you can prioritize serving over selling in your coaching business. So, for example, rather than spending all of your time trying to market yourself and your business online, do everything you can instead to create and disseminate truly meaningful content. You know, and what we would say here is share your best content for free, share your best work for free, which can often feel counterintuitive, but it really does cultivate much more trust with your audience than the alternative. You know, another example might be if you're using Facebook to grow your business, you know, rather than go into Facebook groups to promote your business and services, and we've all seen those groups that have, you know, hashtag promo days where, you know, sometimes we wait to be able to go in there and put our details of our coaching or our offerings out there. You know, instead of doing that, go into these groups to support and serve other people instead. Rather than spend hours and hours trying to make your web copy speak to the heart of your ideal client, instead, why not jump on calls with individual people and find out what they need and what you can do to help them? I see so many people trying to figure out their sales page copy for a product that they've built or are building when they haven't spoken to a single individual in their audience about what they're creating. Something that Helen and I did for this workshop, and I've done for everything that I've ever created, is we actually reached out. Some of you probably were on these calls. We reached out to people who we thought that this workshop series might be a fit for, and we invited those people into conversation. We invited them to share with us their struggles around building their coaching business, to find out and do our market research, essentially, you know, to find out what it is that would really serve people if we were going to pull a workshop series together for them, and whether even a workshop series would be something that they would be interested in buying. And the way we do it, and I find this works really well, is, you know, you carve out an hour of time, you spend 30 minutes in market research, and then you dedicate 30 minutes to helping that person on the call with, you know, anything that they need help with in terms of growing their business or whatever it might be, that's related to the product or service that you're building. So again, you know, subtle differences, subtle shifts in what you do and how you spend your time, but they're hugely impactful. Another example is, you know, rather than trying to perfectly articulate the benefits of your newest product or service in your marketing, and, you know, we've all sat there trying to write the perfect social media post. Instead, you know, sit down and think about who in my audience would benefit from this product or service, and then reach out to those people directly and say, I wanted to let you know that this, you know, this is launching, or this is, you know, open for registration, whatever it might be, and would you like to know more? You know, would you like to have a conversation about it, or would you like some more information? You know, that's a much better use of your time than spending hours trying to write, you know, the benefits of the product or service for this big wide audience. You know, we're always going to prioritize more individual direct connection than a lot of the advice that you see out there, which is about speaking to as many people as possible. And again, rather than spend your time trying to figure out how to better market and sell your products and services, ask yourself daily, what can I do today that would deeply serve my audience? So yes, we are inviting you to deprioritize marketing and, you know, prioritize service here, which for a lot of people I think is a huge relief. So then moving into number 2, a coach coaches. So this is one that I gained from working with a business coach for a year when I first created my business, and it was something that was invaluable to me. He used to say to me on the regular, Caroline, what does a coach do? And I would answer, a coach coaches. And he did that because it was I was often being, distracted by shiny object syndrome. There was lots of things that I thought I needed to be doing in my business to be successful, such as, working on my website, all of that kind of stuff. And he would constantly bring me back to this idea that as a coach, trying to build a coaching business, the most important thing that I can do is coach. And so we're inviting you here to really focus. Focus is, in my opinion, one of the most important factors to business success. And so there's a couple of resources I want to mention that really help me cement this idea in my thinking. One is a book called The One Thing, The Surprisingly Simple Truth Behind Extraordinary Results. And I'll just read a quick quote from author Gary Keller, who says, "Long hours spent checking off a to-do list and ending the day with a full trash can and a clean desk are not virtuous and have nothing to do with success. Instead of a to-do list, you need a success list, a list that is purposefully created around extraordinary results. To-do lists tend to be long. Success lists are short. One pulls you in all directions, the other aims you in a specific direction. One is a disorganized directory and the other is an organized directive. If a list isn't built around success, then that's not where it takes you. If your to-do list contains everything, then it's probably taking you everywhere but where you really want to go." And we would strongly recommend that on your success list is coaching. You need to be in coaching conversations daily. And so another analogy that I really love that comes from Sean McCabe, and I first heard it in a podcast years ago, and there's a link to that here, and I really recommend listening to it, is what he says is, in his experience, he sees so many entrepreneurs with 3 to 5 fires. So, think of a fire as an analogy for a product or a service or, a project within your business. And what he says is he sees so many people, start a fire. And if you've ever started a fire, you know that it takes time. You don't just drop a match and then the fire is created and you can walk away from it. No, it takes time, effort, energy. You have to be there. You need kindling. You need to give it some, blow on it, get it going. And then you need to maintain it. You can't just walk away from a new fire and expect it to stay alive. It needs to be maintained. And so what he says is, stop trying to start and maintain several fires at once, and instead build your bonfire first. Build a bonfire that then becomes sustainable without you needing to give it all of your time and attention. And what we're encouraging you here to have is coaching, or whichever service it is that you provide, be your bonfire. So, rather than worry about ebooks and e-courses and online programs and group coaching and all of that, if you're coach, and have your bonfire be your one-to-one coaching practice. So, and as I said, coach daily. And we know from experience that the best way to grow your business and your confidence and your skill set and your client list is to coach daily. Now, you might be thinking, well, if I have no clients, how do I do that? So that brings us on to creating conversations, which is where we invite you to reach out to people and create and offer powerful coaching conversations with people on a regular basis. And we'll really go into the nuts and bolts of what that means and what that looks like and how you do it later on in the workshop series. But for now, just know that no client, especially a high-paying client, if you're thinking about offering more premium coaching services, was ever created outside of a coaching conversation. I know for a fact that I would never purchase coaching for $1,000 or more by clicking a button on a website. I'm going to want to have a conversation, and not just have a discovery call conversation whereby that person tells me what it might be like to work together, but I'm going to want to have an absolute experience of how impactful that coach could be in my life. And that only happens when we coach people. So again, we're going to talk more about this, so I'm not going to labor the point. So principle number 3, doing business with integrity. So again, this is, reiterating the point that we want you to make service your overriding intention. That means not using service as a strategy to sell, but truly having the desire to be of service to the world as your guiding light. That also means putting the person before the sale. So when your intention is to serve rather than sell, when you're having these coaching conversations with people and you deeply impact them, because you're not just in a discovery call scenario, you're actually coaching them and helping them and having an impact on their lives. In all likelihood, they're going to be interested at times to know more, to have more, and to experience more, and to work with you. And there will be occasions when it doesn't feel right to you for whatever reason. It could be they're not your ideal client. It could be that something just doesn't feel right and you're not sure what it is. It may be that you suspect that therapy might be what they need rather than coaching, or it might be that that you're not the person that can support them the best with what they're struggling with. And so putting the person before the sale means turning some people away or referring them on to someone else, rather than taking the money and hoping for the best. So that's an important part of doing business with integrity. And then finally, don't manipulate people into working with you, which seems obvious, but it's everywhere. It is everywhere in marketing and business advice that we see out in the world. So most of the techniques that you may have heard or been taught around building a coaching business, or any kind of online business for that matter, involve some form of manipulation and persuasion. The advertising and marketing industry as a whole, both online and offline, is built on manipulation and persuading people to buy. And so a couple of ways, and again, we'll go into this more, but a couple of ways in which, just to give you some examples in which you can avoid manipulating people into working with you, is be transparent. Be transparent when you're selling. Be transparent about what you're selling and what your prices are. For example, don't make people jump through hoops to find out what it costs to work with you. We've all been on those sales pages where, we're really captivated by the content and we think that it could be something that really serves us, but we can't find the price anywhere. And we have to jump through some kind of hoop in order just to find out if it's something that we can afford. So avoid tactics like that. Avoid charm pricing. Charm pricing is when you do $997 instead of $1,000, so that it makes people feel like they're getting a bargain, even though really they're not. It's just $3 difference. Don't do that. Start to be aware of how you might be manipulating your audience, and take steps to avoid that. Avoid things like false scarcity, only 2 spots left in this program, book today to avoid missing out, all of that stuff. We see it everywhere. And people are overwhelmed and tired of this kind of marketing. And so the approach that we're sharing with you is a complete alternative to that. And we really encourage you to avoid those things, and avoiding this pressure to buy now. I had people, for example, who were interested in this workshop, and but the timing wasn't right. I did not do what many people are doing. It's like, well, if you don't buy now, you'll miss out, and you may never get access to this content again. I would never do that. What I've said to people is, it's going to be recorded. It will still be on, for sale at a later date, and all of that stuff. But we're encouraged to play on people's fear of missing out in order to get the sale, and that's something that we really, really advise against. So I'm noticing, Helen, do we have any questions? I'm just noticing. No. Okay.
Nope.
So number 4 is doing business. No, sorry. Number 4 is showing up powerfully. And so this one is all about how you show up in your business. When we're feeling a bit insecure, maybe we're a new coach, or we're a new business owner, it can be very easy to fall into this, space of leaking power. And so what we mean by showing up powerfully is lead with conviction. When you're dealing with your audience or prospective clients, take them by the hand and guide them through the process, whether that's the coaching process, whether that's the sales process, whatever it might be the leader in that conversation. And we really encourage you to do that, whether that's a one-off complimentary call that you're giving to somebody for free, or it's embarking on a 6-month coaching program. And part of showing up powerfully is also being the professional. So having, robust policies and procedures in place that support the process that you're guiding people through. And other things, that kind of go without saying, but show up on time to your calls, be responsive to inquiries, communicate effectively with your people. Again, we are going to talk more. We're going to talk more about the business owner mindset in workshop 2. So we'll go into this a bit deeper, what it means to really be the professional in your business. But we're just giving you a flavor here. And then model self-leadership, so those things that you really welcome when you're dealing with somebody that you're considering, embarking on a coaching relationship with, model those for your clients. So clarity, for example, it's something that I really, really try to model whenever I'm talking to anybody in my business. I will be very specific about, okay, here's, maybe some homework that we've set. Do you agree to it? If so, when will it get done? When will I hear from you? At what time of the day will I get that email from you? I'll put it in my diary. I really, really go the extra mile in terms of making things very clear and making sure that, I'm accountable to my audience and to my clients or prospective clients, and that I model that for them so that they can start to bring that to their own lives and their own work. Being, having integrity, for me, that's, it's one of my most valued values, and it's also a very essential part of the approach that we're sharing with you. And lots of the other stuff that we've talked about, speaks to what it means to have integrity in your business. And being responsible, being responsible for, following through, being true to your word, all of that stuff. And then using powerful language. Again, this is something we're going to go into much more detail later on in the series, but there's lots of ways we leak power with our language. So, people will talk about freebies or free calls. We like to use complimentary instead of free because it feels more like a gift instead of, something that is meaningless or useless. We invite people to apply for a complimentary coaching session rather than give them away willy-nilly to anyone who, will take it. And we like to, invite or gift instead of give. So just a couple of examples, and again, we'll go into this in much more detail later on. So that's it for me. I see there are some comments in the chat. Any questions? Okay. No questions so far. So I'm going to hand over to Helen to talk through the other principles.
All right. So next up is be discerning. We've got kind of a few different ways that might show up for you. And the first is choose your business mentors wisely. So we both think it's really fabulous to admire and want to emulate someone who's a bit further along on the path than you. It's a great way of kind of modeling yourself and your business after someone who you trust, who you've seen show up in a certain way, and you really admire and respect it. And that's great. We would advise you to keep looking at that person or those people through a critical lens, and not critical in the sense of criticizing them necessarily, but nobody is you. So you've got your values, and nobody is going to show up exactly the way that you would show up. And we would recommend that you continue to hold your values up alongside your business mentors, or the people that you're following along, and following along their journey, and emulating, to see where there's alignment and where there might be discrepancy. And then an action that we would like you to take, that you can make a note of. You don't have to do this between now and the next workshop, but it's something that would be a really nice conscious action, would be to choose 5 to 7 business mentors whose advice you'll heed, and then eliminate the rest. So this is not to say that you'll be blindly following anyone without checking in with yourself, but these are people that, if you give some conscious thought to it, like, you trust them, you've seen them show up enough, and you trust them, and you feel like there's some alignment with who you are as well. So if you want to make a note that that's something that can also cut down on overwhelm, because if you're only really focused on maybe 5 people who you admire and respect, then you can kind of shut out a lot of the other noise that might be coming at you, where you're getting all kinds of input and advice, from other coaches or business owners. So next up is to choose your clients wisely. And this one's really tricky. And I think that Caroline and I have both had experiences where it's tricky, because sometimes you really do feel somewhat desperate for the income or to fill out your client roster. You've got goals, and somebody comes along and they are not ideal. But you're like, oh, I could probably make it work. Not my favorite client. We're going to say, try to get that, get your head on straight, and really try not to fall for that story. Because not looking forward to working with a client can be a big energy drain, not to mention a client who you're not jazzed about working with. That person, and we'll talk about this later, that person might have different ideas about the kind of coaching that you will provide. I've had that experience before, and you have to speak to it, because once you realize we're not a good fit, it becomes a bit of a liability to continue taking someone's money when you're not going to be able to serve them the way that they are coming to the agreement, expecting to be served or hoping to be served. So you'll want to use a combination of natural intuition, which everybody has when you can turn off the noise. I know a lot of people say, how do I listen to my intuition? And a lot of it is really just kind of turning off the noise. It's not doing anything. It's kind of taking away. And then you'll start to also develop a kind of inkling. You'll get a sense of the qualities that make for a really awesome coaching client. And then you'll also get a sense of the kinds of qualities that tend to show up in clients that you're not really interested in helping, or you're not able to help, or clients who might be better served by someone else. Like, as Caroline said before, maybe even a therapist.
Helen, just to pause there, because Sheila's asked a really great question. So
Yeah.
she asked, I'm curious, what do you do when you realize a person is not a good fit? Do you offer a referral, and how do you communicate that?
Oh, that's a great question, Sheila. Yeah. So I can speak to my experience. I've had that happen on one very memorable occasion when I had already I'd already gone through agreements. I was already kind of set to work with this client. She had already paid me money. Things came up that made it very apparent that we were not a good match for each other. And it was a really hard conversation to have. And we'll talk about having those hard conversations later in the series as well. But I did have to call it out. And it was uncomfortable to say, listen, the kind of coaching that I offer, that I'm happy to provide, is such and such. I am sensing that what you are seeking, or that what you really need, is this other thing. Is that accurate? And to really kind of invite a conversation around it. And we wound up having, it was a difficult conversation, but we wound up really both being able to communicate some parameters. I could communicate my parameters as a coach. She could communicate what her beliefs were about, I am paying you though, so I want you therefore to be this kind of coach because you're a service provider and I'm giving you money. And I said, well, this is different. This is not customer service in the sense that that you give me money and therefore I have to keep my customer happy. That would take all the power out of a really impactful coaching relationship. So we were able to really navigate it slowly. I think it has to happen in a nice slow conversation. It can't be a really heated, quick, let's just get this done conversation. And then I did offer her a referral. I asked her first if she wanted a referral, because I didn't want to assume anything, so I asked her if it would be useful to her. I did have some ideas about some coaches who might be more inclined to offer the kind of coaching that she was seeking. And she said she did want that, and that she also wanted to, to touch base at some later date to sort of see if there was further, if we had any alignment. And I haven't heard from her since, and I did refer her out, and I have no idea how that has unfolded. But I guess it was the important point here, I think, is to do it gently and to also keep it as an opportunity for coaching. So I really wanted the conversation to not just be, I sense you want this and I'm not providing that, I'm providing this, where it's very kind of me versus her. And it was more, let's see if this is an opportunity for you to learn about the kind of coaching I offer, and for me to learn how I might have better communicated these types of agreements with you from the beginning, so that we wouldn't have had this miscommunication. So I hope, okay, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sheila. Yeah, it was tricky, I'll tell you that, but it would have been far more miserable to continue in the relationship for both of us. And it would also wouldn't have been in service to her. She wouldn't have gotten what she wanted, and I would have been out of integrity taking money from someone who I'm not going to be able to help. So that's a great question. Thank you, Sheila. And then next up is to choose your professional development resources wisely. So regardless of the philosophies that you might have learned in your training program, it's great, and actually it's really kind of essential that you add to your continuing education as often as possible. And I think of it, the analogy that pops into my head is I think of like the recommendations for the kind of food that we eat, that you should have this plate that is full of like the colors of the rainbow, veggies of all colors. And that's like the best diet. And I think of professional development as something similar, that you really want to expose yourself to different methodologies, different philosophies, teachings, approaches, and see what really resonates with you. And then incorporate it into your coaching practice. So even if you learned one way, there's a lot to be said for being open to picking up on different approaches that might really resonate, that you wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to. You'll keep growing, you'll become a better coach, and you'll be able to pass that service on to your clients. Next in our principles is to honor the relationship, and we jump right into expectations versus agreements, which we've obviously covered earlier when we set up our agreements, a lot of us, for this workshop. But just to go a little bit deeper, humans do phenomenally well when we are invited to co-create the terms and conditions of a relationship. We just do. We just tend to operate better than when we have something placed on us that is unspoken, that we have to live up to, and we feel that pressure. When we can actually honor one another by coming together with agreements, everybody is happier, and people also feel understood. So something that comes up for me here, though, is also assumptions. And I think assumptions can be tricky, because they definitely fall into expectations, even though maybe they're not outwardly, obviously expectations. So it's really good with your clients to give voice to what you'll do, how you'll show up, and to ask your client to do the same. Very little can be assumed. I'd venture to say nothing should be assumed, because the nature of human interaction is such that we really want to know what we can expect, even if it's not an expectation, if that makes sense. And another thing about that is, the more that you can model this agreements-based relationship with your clients, the more that you set them up for better, more functional relationships in their lives, because that's the nature of a client, coaching client relationship, is that it can be applied to the client's other relationships as well. They can see that sort of powerful example, and then they start showing up in their lives as more powerful people with more impactful relationships. You also end up creating a structure for your client's success within the coaching program because it's very clear how everyone is going to agree to show up. And this, you might note too, is different from the traditional coaching contracts, which a lot of coaching training programs encourage us to create. Those can be very one-sided though, because it sort of is a list of expectations that gets passed on, and then you ask the client to sign off on it. And that's, in my opinion, I think in Caroline's opinion, that's a pretty harsh way to begin a relationship because there's no co-creation there. It's almost a business transaction. And that, you have to note, that also sets the stage for the kind of coaching interaction you're going to have with someone if they feel like it's a business transaction. So something to chew on. So within honoring the relationship, there's also obviously honor your agreements, which we've already discussed. Treat them as your word, because they are, and then live up to your word. Own up when you mess up. So of course we shudder to think that coaches make mistakes, but we are human too. So we do make mistakes, and we often make them in front of the client. And the great thing about that though, and you have to look at it this way, otherwise you'll just stay shuddering at the idea that you made a mistake. But the great thing is that it's another opportunity to model. So you get to show what it looks like to make the mistake, and then to say, hey, I'm going to draw your attention to this mistake. And I'm going to say, this is why I'm sorry, or this is what went wrong here. I'm going to tell on myself, and then I'm going to clean it up. So that's, making it right, and doing so in a modeling way for your client is really powerful. And it's a great way to turn this idea of making a mistake, how uncomfortable that is, on its head.
Helen, just to pop in. So Anne
Sure.
has asked if you could give some examples of agreements that you discuss with clients. And I know that you and I are going to be sharing the exact agreements that we share with our clients, later on in the workshop. But if we could maybe give and the others one or two, just to illustrate the point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of them is the one that just comes to my mind, probably because I just read the own up when you mess up. That's actually one of the agreements that I give with a client is I promise, I can agree, and I promise that that when and if and really, like I said, it's when I make a mistake in our relationship, I will tell on myself. I will come clean to you, and I will make it right. Do you agree to do the same? Will you tell on yourself if you're not showing up to our coaching relationship the way you want to? If the coaching relationship isn't quite working for you, if something feels off, or it doesn't feel, I don't know, impactful, there's something happening, can you agree to speak into it, even if it's uncomfortable? Because I will agree to speak, even if it's uncomfortable, to say the thing. And so can you agree the same? So that would be probably, that's the first one that really springs to mind. I don't know if Caroline, does any of your, we've got a bunch. Do any of yours in particular?
One that springs to mind is responsibility. So like I use the trick that Stephen Covey shares in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he separates the word responsibility into response and ability. And so, I find that really powerful, because one of the key features of my coaching is that I often set challenges to my clients. And so it's what we said at the beginning when we were doing the agreements for this workshop. We've set homework, we're going to challenge you at the end of this workshop, but it's up to you to choose. And so I always say to my clients, there are 3 ways in which you can respond to anything that I ask of you. You can say yes, you can say no, or you can say, let's modify, let's change it and do something differently. And so it's just that agreement that on both sides, this is one of the things to say about agreements that's really important, is all the agreements that I set with my clients, it's not, and this is the difference I think between contracts and agreements. It's not, these are things that I want you as the client to agree to. These are collective agreements that you and I both will sign up to. So that responsibility works both ways. If my client says to me, I want you to, I don't know, check in with me every day, 5 times to make sure I'm on track, I have the ability to also say no, or yes, or let's modify. So that's another example that's things fine. But we will be sharing all the agreements that we give to our clients. Probably lots of similarities between the two later on in the workshop series.
Yeah. Oh, I love that responsibility one. And great. I'm glad that helped in. That was a wonderful question. So thank you. And Sheila, Caroline was talking, I read your point. And what's so funny is as we were creating this workshop and kind of going over who was going to say what, we're talking about agreements, I instantly thought of a vow as well. I thought of, it's in some ways, it's almost the equivalent of, being up with your partner before the people that you love and saying, I promise these things. What do you promise? Or do you promise the same? It's almost vows in a way. It has such power because it's co-created. And it avoids that one-sided, icky disappointment, resentment, downfall of the relationship, because we're speaking about our powerful selves and what we can promise to do, what we will promise to do. And then let's see what else. Where are we here? Prioritize your existing clients. So yes, all too often there is a tendency to be thinking about where the next client is coming from. You close a sale with one client, which the phrase closing the sale sounds pretty harsh, but I just mean payment has happened, agreements have been set up, you have scheduled your calls together, and then you're on to thinking about the next client. So what we'd like to say is avoid this temptation. Keep your thinking focused on the clients you already have. Of course, you're continuing to build your business. Of course, you're continuing with outreach, which we'll talk about later. But this relationship, the one right in front of you, deserves your best and first attention. These are relationships. We are in agreement with each other. They're really powerful relationships, so we should honor them as such. The next principle is it's not about you. This is such an important one. And the things that fall underneath this are near and dear to my heart because I hear them a lot. And I remember in the beginning of my coaching journey, these ones being like, I was like the scream. These ones really got me. So the first one, stop waiting to feel confident. The thing about confidence is it is a part of our natural design. Do you ever remember not feeling confident as a tiny child? Did you have to feel confident before you would ride your bike? It didn't even occur to you that was something, you didn't think about it. You thought you had to get on the bike and do it well, but you didn't think of it as confidence, as a missing ingredient that you somehow needed. It really is simply a product of being at ease, in flow, and turned on creatively, conversationally, whatever. It's the outcome of doing nothing. It's confidence is there. It is there when you stop thinking about it, when you stop obsessing over it, when you stop searching for it and trying to do things to get it. It's there when you stop worrying about it. And what you'll find too is that consistent coaching with a lot of different people will yield something that we might call confidence, but it's actually more of a familiarity or like a sense of calmness about your role in the coaching interaction. That pressure to feel confident will lift when you feel calm about how you're showing up in a conversation and you recognize that it just isn't about you. It isn't about how you feel. It has nothing really to do with you. You're kind of incidental. You happen to be the sounding board, but the person in front of you has all the wisdom and you're just going to help them access it. But your confidence really means diddly. It's really nothing. And this is a hard one. So I can appreciate that you might have, some reactions to this because we're all clinging to this must feel confident thing, but just give this one some thought. Forget making an impression. Be a human being having a conversation with another human being. So yes, we know coaching conversations stir up all kinds of feelings because we want to be of service and we want to be useful and we want the person to like us. And that's where we have to say, wait, that's not about us. It's not about you liking me. It's not about you wanting to be my friend or you telling everyone I'm a great coach or a horrible coach or whatever. It is really important that you don't worry about what the person on the other end of the phone thinks of you, because then your whole mindset then is about how you're performing. And I hope you can see that when you're thinking about how you're performing, you're not really there for the other person. You're not really present. You're kind of in your own self-constructed, self-centered thing, not in an egotistical way, but in a worry spiral. And that's not of service. So the more that you can release that and recognize what your role is in the coaching conversation, and that the coaching conversation is never about the coach, the more you can hold on to that, the better you'll feel. And gosh, if you feel better, you're going to be a better coach, because you're less worried about yourself. Next up, you might need money, but you don't need this person's money. Your bank account and what the balance is not this person's concern, and it cannot factor in to your enrollment conversation and to the kind of enrollment conversation you have. Either you can be of service to the person or you can't, and either the other person wants to pay you for your services or she doesn't. But how much money you have or need, or where you are in making rent this month, those things they just can't be important in a coaching conversation, and you have to push them out of your mind. And if you can't push them out of your mind because things are that desperate, then we really do suggest picking up at least part-time work to get through, because it's not fair to put that into a coaching conversation. And I promise you it will be detected, whether you give voice to it or not, which I can't imagine anyone giving voice to something like that. Like, I need you to help me make my rent this month. But, you don't even have to say it. You don't have to say it, and it will be felt, because there is a desperation to it. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So make sure you put your finances, you deal with them in whatever way you need to, so that in your coaching conversations, there isn't that unspoken pressure to enroll. Okay, and so speaking of money, your fee doesn't reflect your worth. It isn't about you at all. And this is a tricky one, especially when you're in the beginning of your coaching career and you don't know what to charge, because a lot of people say, I don't know what I'm worth or what my coaching ability is worth. And there's a lot of this like hang up on worth and attaching a number to it. What we would like to suggest is that if you're going to insist on making it about worth, make sure that the question you're asking is much less, am I worth X amount, which is making it about you, and much more, what is the achievement of her dream worth to this client? So if we're going to think about worth, it needs to be on the client's terms. What kind of price tag might my client pay to achieve her dream? Not me. What am I worth? What's my service worth? Am I good enough to charge this? It's a pretty stark difference. Moving right along, insights might not happen on your watch, and this is okay. So this one actually took me a really long time to internalize, because I was so desperately, I desperately wanted to have had an impact, or to have helped the person in front of me. I really wanted, and I wanted to know that I did, and that's just like, again, making it about me. But it was really hard to let go of, because I couldn't always tell. Sometimes it was a fabulous conversation and it was just obvious. The person said, this was amazing, thank you. Other times it was a much more quiet conclusion to the conversation. And I didn't know. And what we are promoting here for you is to let go of the outcome as best you can, and to recognize that you don't always get to know what the outcome is anyway. Sometimes you'll find out years later. I think Caroline has had that experience, finding out years later just how impacted somebody was, just how amazed someone was, how their life was changed. And sometimes you never find out. And you don't know which it's going to be. You don't know if you'll ever find out. You don't know if you had the impact you hoped to have, or if you helped the person in the way you hoped to help them. And, but regardless, you can't let knowing or not knowing mean something about you or your coaching. This is about the client and their experience and the insights that they might have, 5 years from now because of something you said that finally clicked, Okay. I'm just mindful of time. So hopefully my speaking is intelligible and you're not like, whoa, she talks fast. I am from New York, so that might have something to do with it. The last principle is energy matters. It doesn't have to be said to be felt. I alluded to this a bit earlier with the desperation, the money piece. And it's important too that you realize, even if it isn't about money, but it's about ego, whatever it is, whatever your unspoken intention is, it will be felt because humans pick up on this stuff. We are hardwired to know when we're being sold to, or scammed or played, or we just pick up on it. And you can't always explain why something feels icky, but you just know when it feels icky. And you know that when it feels icky, you want to turn around and get away. So be aware of that it isn't always what you're saying. It's, in fact, so much of the nonverbal stuff is what's being picked up on. Check your intention. So this speaks to that as well. On the positive flip side of this, it doesn't have to be said to be felt. On the positive flip side is that when we show up with an intention to serve and to put the person before us ahead of making the sale, this can also be felt, which is wonderful. And you know what that feels like when someone is just wonderful to be around because they genuinely care. You can't maybe put your finger on why you feel good around the person, or why you're drawn to the person, why you feel like you want to share with the person. But when intentions are pure, it is felt on an unconscious level. And we link to a blog post by George Kao where he talks more about kind of honing this practice of bringing his intentions to a pure place. It is a practice. I wouldn't say that you can just click on pure intentions and then you're good to go. I think we're kind of always having to check our intentions because our intentions are always changing. And the more we can kind of ground them in service, the better off we all are. So, and then lastly, under energy matters, desperation stinks. So I've definitely alluded to this. And if you are desperate to make the sale because you need this client to pay your rent or boost your ego, they will feel this without your stating it. So this might show up for you when you feel tempted. I felt this way a lot early on. It still comes up periodically, but much less now that I'm aware of it. This temptation to like, just check in, or I'm just following up, and it's like, that's the wrong, unless I can say with absolute certainty that if I've written to somebody and I've not heard back, and then I encounter an article or a blog post or something that I'm like, damn, this is going to be very useful for her, I will send it. Not if I've had like many unanswered emails, like we're talking like if I've never heard back once, but something reminds me of the person, I will send it, and it will be a pure intention of, I want to share this with you. But unless that's your intention, resist the impulse to check in and follow up, because that is a selfish impulse. It just is. It's not pure. It's because you know how it feels when someone keeps checking up on you and you don't have interest in having a relationship. It feels yucky, and you kind of are like, oh, I want them to get the message. I don't want to have to come out and say it, So just check yourself and know that if you are desperate, it will smell really bad, and people will detect it from a mile away. So, are there any questions? Were there any that popped up that I missed, Caroline?
No, nothing in the chat.
Okay. There's so many great comments. I'll have to catch up on. But okay. All right. So again, keep, pop comments or questions into the chat. One of us is always keeping up with it. And Caroline, I don't know if you feel ready to hop into the Let Go list or.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So, we've thrown a lot of information at you there with the 8 principles. And what we've introduced is, or we've alluded to, what may become priorities for you going forward in your business. Things like connecting with people, being of service, coaching, all of that stuff. And so some of you may be thinking, this is all well and good, but how do I fit that in with all of the other stuff that I have to do to build my business, all of the other advice that I have consumed that, tells me that I should be on, every social media channel, I'm working on my website and doing my copy and all of that stuff. And so what we felt could be really useful is to give you a let go of list. And so what we're going to run through here is those things that we're not saying take off your table forever. We're not saying you never need work on these things, but we're saying for now, and especially if you're a newer business owner or a newer coach, or you're a struggling coach and business isn't working and you found that some of these activities are having you spinning your wheels, that you can deprioritize them for now to make the strategy and the approach that we're going to be sharing more of with you the priority. And so on your let go list, and hopefully this brings about some relief for some of you. It may induce panic for some of you if you're really attached to some of these things, but be open. So number 1, creating the perfect website. So, I often remind myself that business existed and thrived before the internet was created. So whilst there are a million people out there that are going to tell you that you cannot build a successful business without an amazing, perfect, optimized website, it's simply not true. And so to prove it, and it almost seems, it makes sense because some of Helen and I's biggest influencers, coaches and business mentors, don't have the most beautiful websites. And so you can see here, Steve Chandler, some of you may know. I'm just gonna, I won't open them all because it could take a while, but feel free. What's going on here? I don't know why it's doing that. So feel free to have a look, but you'll just see. Let's see if I can. Okay. So Steve Chandler, one of the most successful coaches I know, blatantly bringing in 6 figures plus, has, authored many books, is a huge, huge influence on Helen and I. We absolutely love Steve and his work, is very, very big in the coaching world. And this is his website. It's pretty unspectacular. So, and feel free at your leisure to look through the other links, because, these are some of the people whose advice I heed the most and have spent, significant money investing in their business advice around coaching and business, and their websites are less than beautiful. So I share those because it can be very difficult to believe that we don't need the perfect website in order to be successful in business. But for me, these guys prove it. And finally, under creating the perfect website, don't worry so much about trying to create the perfect web copy with the perfectly crafted messaging, because your message will and does evolve and strengthen over time and as you coach more people. And so what we see a lot of is newer coaches trying to perfect their messaging before they've even coached this, a decent number of people. And what inevitably happens is your message changes and you've wasted all of that time working on your website, rather than spending valuable time, growing and evolving as a coach by coaching people. So similar to that, on the let go list, is creating the perfect visual brand. So in order to have people buy from us. You know, we need people to know, like, and trust us. And so branding can often feel like one of those things that feels especially important, because it can be a way to achieve trust and being liked by people. You know, if our brand speaks to, you know, our ideal client, then they're more likely to buy from us. But what we're saying here is it's not the only way, and I would argue it's even not the most important way to cultivate that that knowing, liking, and trusting. So if you're finding yourself getting tripped up, you know, with branding, if it's not something that you can afford, you know, to spend thousands of dollars hiring a consultant to do it, and it's something that you're using, if you're honest with yourself, as an excuse not to move forward in your business, we just wanted to share with you a couple of ways that are actually more meaningful ways to cultivate deeper trust with your audience. So, for example, and again, you know, we've alluded to these already, serving your audience powerfully by sharing meaningful and relevant content. You know, if you're putting out, even if your brand isn't perfect and your website isn't perfect, but you're sharing regularly, you know, meaningful content that impacts your audience, they're not going to care if it's, you know, comes along with a pretty logo or, you know, perfect photos. Gather glowing testimonials from people who have been impacted positively by your work. And again, this can come from people who you've coached, you've given and gifted complimentary sessions to. It doesn't have to be paying clients if you're in the early days of your business. That is going to be more impactful than, for many people, than the perfectly designed website and brand. And so, you know, one of the things that I encourage people to do is, if you have a Facebook page for your business, make sure that you are using the template. There's different templates that you can use for your business page that enables you to have reviews and recommendations, and actively take time to get those testimonials and reviews. And again, you know, the practicalities of how to do that and when to do that, we'll be talking about in a later workshop. But for now, know that having those is much, and those come from being in coaching. You don't get those if you're not coaching regularly. And then market your business with integrity using authentic and manipulation-free strategies. Again, we've alluded to some of those. We'll go into those in more detail later on. But again, if you are marketing your business with integrity, as do the mentors that we mentioned earlier above, Steve Chandler, Tad Hargraves, George Kao, I personally do not care if their website is pretty or their brand is beautiful. It doesn't matter to me, because I feel the integrity of what they're doing, and I feel the power and impact of the work that they're sharing with me. And then, you know, that leads to cultivating trust with your audience by proving that you're not just out to sell to them. And we've talked a lot about that, you know, putting the person before the sale, all of that stuff. When you get that trust, you know, those other things, those more visual aspects of your business, like website and brand, you know, don't matter as much as you might think that they do. And, you know, also showing up powerfully and consistently. Again, you know, if you're showing up and you're regularly in contact with your audience, serving them powerfully, they're not going to care. They are not going to care what your website or brand looks like. And then choosing the perfect niche. I love this one, because I see this one trip people up all the time. Helen and I have seen so many coaches get lost and stuck trying to figure out their perfect niche before they've even started working with paying clients, which is sort of nuts, you know, because how are you going to know that your niche is for you until you've actually spent time working with people? And so we really do recommend that you consider the idea that you don't get to choose your niche, it chooses you, and that comes with time, having coached a lot of people. So Steve Chandler, who we love and we've mentioned several times already, says this about letting your niche find you. So I'm just going to open this up. Give it a second. So, let your niche find you. Most coaching certification programs urge novice coaches to find and choose a niche, a speciality. I have never encountered such counterproductive nonsense. Most of the coaches I know who are extremely successful have no niche at all. A niche would limit them. It would shut them off from many categories of people who are yearning for their help. I know coaches who emerge from certification programs crowing about the niche they have chosen. They have no clients, but they have a niche. I'm going to coach rodeo clowns. I mean, good luck. The only time I see a niche working in a coach's favor is when it emerges on its own. If you have a certain success in a certain category, and it can happen by accident, you can now go to other people in that category and they are more likely to listen to your success stories. But even then, you don't have to let it restrict you. I love that. So let me just get back to the document. Okay, and so a word on that in terms of, allowing your niche to evolve, when you've had success with a certain group, because some of you might be wondering, well, Caroline, you have a niche, you work with female entrepreneurs, supporting them with conscious business. But that came after years of coaching and having coached hundreds and hundreds of people, and realizing that, when I looked at and got curious about the kind of people that I felt excited to work with and that I felt lit up to work with, and with whom I saw greater successes from our work together, it definitely chose me. I definitely felt, okay, this is what I'm feeling called to do. So, my advice to you is, if you're sat there thinking, oh, what should my niche be? I need to choose my niche, which I've heard so many times. You're not even close to being ready to consider niching. And again, we'd also say, we recommend that you don't even consider niching until you've coached at least 100 people. And that's not including your fellow coaching training students. So, I think that's it for me. I'm just noticing the time, Helen.
Yes.
We've got 6 minutes. I think we should plow on and just go through the final bits of the Let Go list.
Okay.
And what do you
think? We've got one question from Sheila, and she anticipated it correctly. She says, I'm guessing this will be in one of the next workshops, but how do you think about creating meaningful content that serves people? I think this was when we were talking about creating the perfect visual brand. Sometimes I struggle with this when writing to my list or creating a new blog post. That's a great point.
And we will cover it, Sheila. Don't worry, we've got you covered. We'll definitely go into that more in the kind of practical stuff. So we're aware that we're getting close to time. If you have to drop off at half past the hour, please just drop off. You don't need to leave a note or apologize or any of that stuff. Just drop off. You'll get the recording within 24 hours of us finishing up, so you can go back and review anything that you've missed. And if you're happy to stay on, we'll keep going because we're so close to the end. It seems silly to push it over to the next workshop. So Helen, I'll hand over to you.
Sure. Okay, so next up, I am unmuted, right? Yeah. Next up is that you can let go of is designing the perfect suite of packages. So again, focus on your bonfire. If you have some interest in developing retreats one day or group coaching programs, that's great. There will be a time and a place. It doesn't have to happen now. Let go of trying to wrap your head around it now. And speaking of now, while you're trying to build your business into this roaring fire that you can step away from for a moment without fear that it will go out, your one-on-one coaching bonfire, while you're building, that needs to be your first priority. So in terms of packages, that's something to think about. And then kind of taking that a step further is to keep it simple in the beginning. Start with one offering. I think when I started, I kind of followed the example that I had seen set by many coaches ahead of me, which was like 6 sessions over the course of 3 months. I don't know why I picked it. I picked it because everyone else picked it. I had no experience to really base my decision off of. And you know what? It was a great place to start. I got to develop opinions about how long do I like a session to last. I happen now to know that I like 90-minute sessions. I really enjoy that with a client, and anything less than that feels too short. Now I sell single sessions, and I sell double sessions with like a check-in, a 30-minute check-in in between. I couldn't have known that in the beginning, but the important bit is start with one offering in the beginning, and it can be fairly arbitrary. Take a stab at guessing how long you want to work with somebody, what feels right, and then slap a price on it, and we'll talk about that later too. Well, we did talk about it a bit, that the price can be pretty arbitrary, actually. Soon enough, though, you'll figure out for yourself what your preferences are. So rest assured. Next is, don't be afraid to tailor it to the individual in front of you. So coaching is so personal, and it's one-on-one service. It's highly customizable. There is no need to fit a person into a package. If you've got someone in front of you who could benefit from an extra 2 sessions than what your package says, propose it. Change the price accordingly. If you think that somebody would do really well to have an all-day Saturday with you, live or on video call, whatever it might be, change your price tag accordingly and propose it. Just recognize that you don't need to anticipate everyone's preferences. You can, as long as you're willing to iterate and you recognize that flexibility is a really good trait to develop right now. Just be willing to tailor. This is exactly what this industry, this is the benefit of coaching, is that it is so customizable. Let's see, be mindful of your energy. So we ask some questions here, that are, it's food for thought. I think that a lot of these questions, though, can you handle 20 clients a month? Do you want to? Some other questions that come up for me is, how many calls in a day is too many? How long of a call feels like it's too much or not long enough or whatever. Experiment. You're not going to know just by, you have to start somewhere. You have to pick a certain amount. You have to see what it feels like to have 4 back-to-back 2-hour calls in a day, which I know Caroline's had, I've had. Like, you have to, if you've experienced it, you can say, oh, wow, that is not for me. And no harm, no foul. You can change it. It is an ever evolving thing, your business, and you're the boss of it. So you do get to change it. And you can't really fully appreciate what works for you until you've tried a bunch of different things. So don't be afraid to experiment and iterate. Okay, mastering all of the social media. This is another one that comes up early on, and it's something I remember feeling profoundly. And that is, pick one channel to work with. It's so much better to be delivering solid, consistent content on one platform than it is to be trying to be everywhere and make sure you touch everyone on every channel. I think that's all I really have to say about that, at least initially. But the thing about social media is that it is, make meaningful content and connection the priority. It's a great way to share for idea sharing. It's a great way to put out, a post and see if it lands with people. But the bigger part of social media is that it is a wonderful opportunity for meaningful interaction. So use that to your advantage. Interact with other people's feeds, respond to comments that are on yours. That's a way of staying engaged with people, and cultivate conversations. And then you might come to find that a particular channel, the one channel that you've picked, ends up being a really great avenue for conversations that turn into, I don't want to say offline, because you might still be talking to people online, but basically real life coaching conversations. And for me, Instagram has actually become a place where I'm having a lot of direct message, private chats with people, getting to know what their needs are. And then if I think I can help, I send them a link to my calendar. I propose, and we'll talk about more about that strategy. That's the real meat of the strategy here later on. But I have found that I can use this one channel. I don't have to be on Twitter. I don't have to be, doing Instagram lives all the time. I'm using it kind of as like a text messaging with certain people who I just gel with, or their feeds resonate, whatever it might be. Deprioritize aesthetics. So we know this is a very unpopular thing to say, especially if you are a coach who also happens to like and appreciate design, which is fabulous if you like it, as long as it isn't a distraction that is causing you to procrastinate on money-making activities and service activities. Something to think about is that you will never ever start a social media feed if you're obsessed with it looking perfect from the get-go, especially the visual ones like Instagram. I remember starting out and being obsessed with my color palette and really needing it to be like needing to know what my colors were. How can I post a picture if the colors are going to clash with like my logo colors? And it was just a huge procrastination device, you know, because I had things that were meaningful that I could have been sharing, that could have been serving people. And I was using this as an obstacle. I was getting hung up on just the look of it all. So definitely deprioritize the aesthetics the best that you can. They have a time and a place, and it's not at the forefront. Allow your social media activity to supplement rather than replace your outreach work. So as we say here, a single 60-minute phone call with one person is time that is far better spent than spending 60 minutes writing a post that you're hoping will go viral. That is a big hope to pin to a post, and the one-on-one contact can't be beat. And then be mindful to serve more than to sell. So everyone's going to develop her own ideal ratio. We propose an 80-20 ratio. So 80% of the time you're sharing your best work for free. You're making meaningful contribution. You are trying to help people. And then 20% of the time, maybe you are alerting them to a product or a service you have for sale. But you'll find your own ratio. That's just the one that we suggest, especially starting out. So why are we giving you permission to let go of these activities? Well, we're not saying let go of them forever, but we are saying that they're not all best pursued on the front end of building a business, especially when income is still pretty scarce. These are activities that can take place down the line, but they don't need to be at the front end. And in fact, at the front end, they will serve as a distraction and a procrastination tool. And we don't want that for you, because that's a way to not get your business going. So when you let go of these things, you create the space to execute what you will come to learn later on in this workshop as a winning strategy. It really has been winning for us, of serving your audience through coaching, connection, and content. So that wraps us up there. And I'm just wondering if there are any questions. I had my turbo jets on, so we buzzed through as fast as we could there.
Yeah, no questions in the chat.
All right.
Okay.
Terrific.
Thanks, Helen.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
that brings us on nicely to your homework, which again, we'll just state you have no obligation to complete, but we really recommend, because it may feel a bit divorced from what we've been talking about today, although it shouldn't do, but it's going to set you up. It's going to prime you for workshop 3 and executing the strategy. And so basically what we want is to get you into connection mode right off the bat. So what that means is your challenge for the following week, should you choose to accept it, is to reach out and connect with 50 people in the next 7 days. Some of you may have heard this challenge if you've ever had a coaching call with me. And before you try to tell yourself that, wait, I don't even know 50 people, hop on over to your Facebook friend list or your email contact list, and we're fairly certain that the numbers will beg to differ. So I remember when I was first set this challenge by my business coach back in 2014, and I could not even conceive of how I was going to achieve this challenge, but I did, and I've done it many times since. So it is possible, I promise you. And so just running through quickly how to reach out. You can email, Facebook Messenger, call, Skype, text. It doesn't really matter how you reach out and connect. What matters is that this isn't a blast on social media. This is you making direct, personal, and individual connections or reconnections with people in your life. And who are we inviting you to reach out to? Anybody and everybody. It could be family, could be friends, it could be old colleagues that you've lost contact with, people you went to school with years ago, Facebook contacts that you don't really know, but they're in your friend list anyway. Could be people you admire, online or offline, or even total strangers. So really, it could be anyone at all. And then what to say when you reach out, to keep this as simple as possible and to avoid you going into this space of, oh my God, how do I, connect with 50 people in 7 days. what we're inviting you to do is to keep it as simple as possible. So we recommend going for a really simple message. You know, the way I've done this challenge in the past, and it's worked well for me, is to do it on email or Facebook, and just to reach out to people in my network and say, you popped into my thoughts recently, and I wondered how you've been. Would love to hear how you are and what you've been up to since we last spoke. And of course, you know, that's not going to work for everybody if it's somebody, you know, that you haven't spoken to in years or you've never spoken to before. But it really is, you know, the key is to keep this brief and, you know, to keep it genuine to you, and not complicated. We don't want you to overthink this or to make it more complicated than it needs to be. The only key is that the contact is personal and genuine, and that you don't get lost in the details to make this, you know, what can quickly feel like an impossible task. And then why are we inviting you to do this? We want to get you, like I said, right off the bat, in a mode of connection. You know, feeling connected is a muscle that needs to be worked regularly. And so many of us, especially if we're working online, we're solopreneurs, you know, working by ourselves, we can get so used to being hunched up over our laptops, worrying about all the things that we've just given you permission to let go of, you know, trying to make this business thing work, that we start to feel really disconnected, and we feel you know, out of the loop with our own network. And so we really want to get your networks activated and lit up. And there are potential business benefits to this. You know, people, if you're asking people how they are and what they're up to, they're likely to return the favor, although you'll find some people don't respond at all. But people are going to say to you, you know, I'm great. What are you up to? What's new in your world? And you may well be saying, well, I'm now a coach, or I'm working on my business, or whatever it might be. That is potentially going to have someone ask, you know, for more information, or they might say, oh, I was looking for a coach, or I know someone who's looking for a coach. So it could potentially lead to clients, referrals, or new business leads. But we don't want that to be the intention behind this piece of homework. You know, despite these potential benefits, for us, it's really, really important that for the purposes of this exercise, your intention has to be to purely connect. And so to be connected just because it feels good to be connected, and it feels wonderful to have your network lit up. And so there's a wonderful video that I share with a lot of people, which is called How to Connect with Potential Clients. And the whole point of the video is that, you know, he says the problem around connecting with potential clients lies in that very question. And it speaks to this idea of connecting for the sake of connection, not for anything else. So that's it. That's your challenge if you choose to accept it. I hope you do, because it will move you. It will move you between now and when we speak again. And I think it will set you up to really get the most out of the next two workshops. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I see something in the chat. Helen will check that for me now. If the document is here, I've shown you at the beginning how to ask a question. So if you go away and you want to follow some of the links and look at some of the resources and that kind of stuff, and questions arise, if it relates to the content of this workshop, please do drop it into the document itself. That's going to be really helpful, because it's really useful for other people to see the questions that you're asking and the answers that we then give. And if it's not related to the content and it's logistical or personal or any of that stuff, then do feel free to email us directly. We've got our email addresses here. And just one point to make, I'm in Spain, so for those of you in Europe, you'll likely get a faster response if you contact me, and for those of you in the States, you'll likely get a faster response if you contact Helen. So between us, we've got the entire continent pretty much covered, and we'll be able to respond to you pretty quickly. So I'm just going to check in the chat.
We do have a question from Anne.
Okay. So
I'm in
a course on Healthy Boundaries, the Facebook group where we share exercise and thoughts. Do these posts and sharing count? Is this toward this? I'm guessing this is towards meaningful contact. Sheila, Anne, feel free to unmute your microphone if you want to talk to me about it. But I'm going to say, to count to the challenge. Okay, I get
homework,
it.
I think. Yeah.
It depends. If you're talking about sharing a comment inside a Facebook group, then no, it doesn't count. It has to be direct and personal contact with another human being. So for example, if you were to, if there's someone in your Facebook group and you think, oh, I see that, I'd like to get to know that person better. We want this to feel genuine and authentic, not just plucking people out of the air. I've been curious about this person. I've been interested in their story. Reach out to them and tell them that, hey, we're in this group together. I've seen some of your posts. I'm interested in your story. I'd love to get to know you better. Bam. It's 2 minutes, but it's direct and it's personal. So I hope does that answer the question, and let me know if it doesn't. But that's what we mean. That's what we mean by direct and personal versus kind of, putting stuff out there. And no questions from Kevin. Okay. Genuine connection. Yes, yeah. Always. That is definitely the intention behind this piece of work. So lovely. So we have run over a tiny bit. It's been amazing. We've talked a lot. We've thrown a lot of information at you. We hope that with the guidebook, you can go back and digest and, dip in and out the content. What we'll have for you when we jump on the call next week is we'll have workshop 2 in there. You won't see that because we don't want to overwhelm you at this stage with all of the content for the entire series. Please do ask questions, write to us, let us know anything that comes up as a result of what we've shared here today. Helen, anything to add before we wrap up?
I think that covers it. I'm impressed, and also, I know we're a little bit over, but I really think we packed a punch. So I hope that it's, you all let your brains, settle. They're probably very full sponges right now, and just let them settle for a little bit. I think we've given you a lot to think about.
Yeah. Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming.